Hey everybody, Brandon here. Welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be covering another year in chess. This will be 2022, so I believe this is my fourth full year in the game. And just like the last one, I had no tournament games in this one, so this will mainly be a blitz coverage of what type of openings I was playing and kind of how I was transforming as a player that wasn't competing anymore. And I think there's still some interesting things that can come from that. Just a few small stats before we start. I started at 1917 and I ended at 1961, so that was like the lowest improvement I believe I had at the time of from start to end of year. But that's natural. Like the higher you get rating wise, the more likely you're going to be slowing down quite a bit. I also had a high rating of 2036 and my lowest was 1749. And yeah, so that was also an interesting change where, although I wasn't really increasing by as much, the margin as to which how much I would fall shrunk quite a bit, which was nice. So I was mainly staying between 1800 and 2000 throughout the year. Well, yeah, it was almost exclusively because, well, I didn't go under the I didn't go under 1750 and I didn't go above 2036. So all right, anyways, let's actually get into the openings because I think that's the interesting part. Let's see what I was playing as white. So e4 was still a pretty big contender, but now I think it was this year where I was playing a lot of d4 actually, and surprisingly having pretty good results with it. 61% win rate as opposed to e4, which was not even close to as good. And I'm curious as to why that's the case, so I want to jump into e4 here. I was still having horrible results against the Sicilian, against the Scandinavian, and actually against the French, I wasn't doing so bad, despite the fact that I was still playing, I believe, the exchange. Yeah, exactly, I was playing the exchange pretty much the whole time, which isn't really, anything crazy. So that's pretty fascinating. As for the Sicilian, I believe one of the biggest problems for me was the e6 Sicilians. And that does appear to still be the case. I have a pretty bad results here against e6, but only 14 games were played. The majority of the games were d6, which also appears like I wasn't doing so hot either. I played a lot of c4s in these games, trying to get into a Maroczy position, just something that wasn't a regular Sicilian. I don't know why I didn't just go for bishop e5 check then, which I feel like will give you those types of c4 positions, but in a better way. But okay, in the open Sicilian, which I would play 2/3 of the time, I am curious as to what I was struggling against here, mainly against Najdorf. Now I feel like in 2022 and moving into 2023, I have a better understanding of the positions that I like to see against the Najdorf. So I'm a little less concerned now. So it is unsurprising that a6 I had a little bit of struggling against, because I'd always play bishop g5, which is one of the more popular lines. Not the most popular, but still something to be concerned about. And as for the other openings, the one big thing I wanted to quickly take a look at is the Scandinavian. Because, well, okay, if we see e5 and we see that I have good results here, like in knight c6, I'm going to be playing bishop e5, which isn't surprising. Let's see here, knight f6, good results. Yeah, everything is positive, which is great, except for the Danish gambit, which now I feel a bit more happy to see and play against. But yeah, the Scandinavian, and I believe the reason why I have bad results is because I play not really a challenging move here. And the move I would play, well, I would of course take first, but I would always play knight f3 here. And I would still play it half the time in this position as well, which is interesting that I didn't just only play the move. I finally started playing knight c3 more. Knight f3 is not really as great as knight c3. Knight c3 is objectively just a better try. And yeah, moves like bishop g4 generally, I believe, cause problems. Turns out I have okay results. Not enough games for it to matter, but this is interesting that I finally started playing knight c3, and even still when I did, I would also just have bad results, like queen a5, and I guess I just didn't really know any theory here at the time, and I feel like that's actually still the case in 2022. So maybe that's something to work on, which is actually really important to know. Okay, that's gonna cover it for the Scandinavian. I don't want to go too crazy in each of them. I believe for the Caro-Kann, I was still playing the same old thing. I'm guessing knight c3, yep. And okay, 50-50 results, which isn't maybe the best thing with right. Actually, when you go further into it, I'm starting to get negative results again. Ruh-roh. That's no good. Yeah, these results aren't so good. After h4, actually I only won a quarter of the games, or like the quarter of the games were like favored for me, which isn't good. But that is good to know, actually, because that does help find weaknesses in my play. So yeah, definitely the Caro-Kann I think is something that I had to work on then, and I should probably work on more now, looking at this. Okay, anything else? I think the perk is interesting to cover. So yeah, I would mainly just play d4, and against knight f6. Yeah, I mainly played bishop d3 here, and I played this in a few tournament games as well, which isn't really that challenging. I think I'm switching now to a move like f3. I think this is a little bit better, a little bit more safe to play, just because the idea is we still get our King's Indian. The reason why someone would play bishop d3 is because they're going for a King's Indian defense, except with their bishop on d3 instead of on e2. But the bishop on d3 is much worse than the bishop on e2. So if you want to get a King's Indian in the perk, the best way to do it is actually just by playing f3. But this means you do have to kind of go for a same-ish. And the idea of f3 is that the only ways for black to equalize are to not go into the King's Indian. But if they want to go into the King's Indian, if they like the opening, then we just get a normal same-ish King's Indian, and this is totally playable. So yeah, that's something that I added to my repertoire as of late, and something that I thought I would pass on to you guys. If you're looking for a way to deal with the perk, I actually recommend going into a King's Indian. You just kind of have to know the King's Indian well and be willing to play into it, which of course not everyone's willing to do. As someone that used to play a lot of the King's Indian, as we'll probably see from my games with black from this year, we're going to see a lot of King's Indians. But that's going to cover it from the white side. Let's go to the black side now. Okay, now we are going to be looking at what I was playing with black. And funnily enough, yeah, so not all of my openings were that great this year, but I'm noticing something interesting is that a lot of my black openings are much better than how my white openings were going. I had negative scores in a few of them. Here it seems like I have a positive score. Again, when the score is below 50%, when you see it above me, that means that black scores better. If it's above 50%, that means white scores better. So now that we're looking at the black side and we see less than 50%, this is actually a good thing. So let's look at e4 first. I was mainly playing the Alekhine, which isn't really surprising, actually. I played the Alekhine quite a bit this year because I realized that theory was not a strong suit of mine at the time. Now I feel like that's somewhat changed. I feel like I've gotten a lot better at understanding some theoretical openings. But I was more interested in studying things like endgames or tactics or any of those other things. And also I was pretty lazy at this time because I had just like quit like a year ago. And I wasn't really interested in studying too in depth. So yeah, playing a lot of Alekhines, as we can see here. The majority of my games were Alekhines and then some Caro-Kanns. I didn't really play too many Sicilians or anything like that. I played a little bit of G6, which is just like hoping for King's Indian stuff, I guess. Like, because I'm not really a perk player. So That's, I think, where that's going. But let's look at knight f6, shall we? After e5, knight d5, we see c4 and d4. They probably mainly just transpose, yeah, d4. And these main lines, I think, is where I would actually struggle a bit, which is not really surprising, because these main lines, well, they're main lines for a reason against the Alekhine, and the Alekhine's not really a main weapon for a reason for top players, is because you get these really uncomfortable positions. Seems like I was scoring like even 50-50 in some of them. Bishop e3, bishop g7. Like, not the worst results, honestly, for especially something like the Alekhine. So maybe that's something to pick back up in the future. It's a really weird weapon that people really wouldn't expect. And I think Kamil Plikta and a national master, I'm forgetting his name, which is really unfortunate. He wrote a book on the Alekhine. Brian Tillis, National Master Brian Tillis, I believe, plays the Alekhine. I don't know if he plays it in tournaments, but he did write a book on it, and I know he's played a lot of it online. But you know, Kamil Plikta is much stronger than me, and he says it's an interesting surprise weapon, so I can't really complain about that. But it is important to note that if you play something like the Alekhine, you do have to realize you're gonna get some worse positions, and you have to just be okay with that, and just hopefully use the surprise factor as a big reason to why you're playing the opening and trying to score some wins. So other than that, I was playing the Caro-Kann a lot. Knight f3, d4. It's surprising I'm seeing a lot of knight f3. I'm more expecting d4. Alright, so yeah, again, against the Caro-Kann here, or in the Caro-Kann, I would have great results against the exchange, which is interesting because I don't remember having great results here. Like, this is a very scary variation to play against, just because when you get the isolated pawn positions in a blitz game, you have to remember, sure, an isolated pawn is a weakness, but just because it's a weakness doesn't mean that white doesn't have their trumps as well here. And, well, white generally, the side with the isolated pawn is the one attacking. So the fact that I was scoring so well as a defender in these lines is pretty surprising. Against e5, which is the advanced Caro-Kann, I would do okay. A lot of people would play bishop d3, and for some reason, yeah, not maybe the results I was expecting. Yeah, to play e6, hoping for knight f3, because I believe I knew at the time, yeah, this is actually a really good line for people to know if you play the Caro-Kann, is if they bring the knight to f3 and they trade off these bishops early, you have this maneuver queen a5 check, and then queen a6, doesn't matter how they develop here, but queen a6 prevents them from developing by castling. So they kind of are forced into a queen trade. There's a few requirements. First off, you want this knight on f3, because if they can move away, play knight e2, and then castle, then it doesn't work, and queen a6 is, you know, the queen's offside a little bit. Not fully. There are some uses for it on the queen side. Generally, we will play on the queen side, but it's a lot of moves to make. Another thing is that the light square bishops were exchanged. And another thing is that our knight is still on b8. So if they take on a6, we can now take on a6 with our knight, and we're pretty happy here. Yeah, I actually won a game in this line, supposedly. So, great. Going back here, yeah, I played against g4 a little bit, h4 even, which is funny. I would always play h6, which is surprising. I think h5 is a bit safer. h6, it invites moves like g4 and then like e6. I'm surprised e6 wasn't played and g5 was instead. That's surprising, actually. Did I play bishop takes c2 here? I did. My cats are going crazy. I don't know if you just saw that. They're whatever. Yeah, so rook takes h8, and then bishop takes d1, and then rook takes... Yeah, I ended up winning this game. This is crazy to look at, but... Yeah, h6, again, just really surprised I played that instead of h5. h5 feels a bit like the safer move. Generally, what you'll see here is, I think, bishop d3 takes, and then either e6 or is it queen a5 here? I think e6 is the more popular move. And the idea here is, well, either bishop g5 or knight d2. There's lines like this, with like the knight coming to f3, castles g3, and then things get a little bit blurry for me there. I'm a little less familiar specifically, but I know that if you see something like this and then they go queen a6, the idea with the knight on d2 is now there's c4, trying to keep pieces on, and then if, you know, if black tries anything like knight b6 or anything, well, they always have b3 to make sure that they get, like, not a hanging pawn structure, but they get a structure where we can't trade queens and they're active, and they're just trying to play against black's position here. I don't know how I feel about the white position, honestly. I know that it's about equal. Maybe sometimes a white can get a slight edge, but it's really hard to believe in these positions as white, honestly. So going back, all right. Yeah, so that's kind of fascinating that I was doing so well against the exchange, especially with c4 variations. One other variation to look at is knight c3. Knight d2 is kind of the same. I would always take on e4. Knight takes e4, bishop f5. And yeah, I'd have slightly better results here. And I think the reason why that I had slightly better results as black and worse results as white is because I believed in the position more for black than I did with white. Yeah, h4, h6, h5, bishop h7, bishop d3. Some bishop c4s, but mainly bishop d3. Takes. And it was funny back then, like 2020 and 19, even 18. Whenever I would like play openings, it'd be like, oh, they didn't play the main line. This might not be good. Not realizing, like, I don't know. I had a very narrow view of how theory worked. So if my opponent like deviated from like the main line, which was like the most popular master game move all the way to the end, which is not how you have to play, by the way, then I'd be like, oh yeah, okay, there's going to be something here. And obviously, for those that play chess for more than an hour, know that that's not true. So I had this very innocent view of theory where, again, if we look here, a move like bishop c4, if I saw this in a game at the time, I know for a fact I would underestimate and be like, yeah, this is stupid. But this is totally a move. This is very normal. Yeah, just something to think about. Yeah, let's go on. So now we've seen like some Alekhine stuff and some Caro-Kann stuff. Let's check out the d4 openings. c4 I had pretty bad results against. Actually, let's cover that first, and then we'll get to d4. Why not? I would try to go into a King's Indian, but whenever my opponents did, it looks like I did okay. Knight c3, and then all of a sudden, well, if they go d4, then it's just a King's Indian. But if they ever played something like a proper English where they don't go for d4, seems like didn't have the most fun. I had like inconsistent moves here. I didn't have like a specific repertoire, which I think is kind of a problem because we'll see c4, it might not be the most common opening, especially for me now, but it's still something you gotta know how to play against. And again, even like, I don't know, even in this position, I'm guessing, yeah, two different moves. Just kind of playing whatever against the English, which isn't so good. I'd play like a King's Indian setup, sure, but that's not always what's going to happen in the games. So the only thing to note really is I still had no prep against English. So let's get into d4 openings now. All right, d4, knight f6, naturally, pretty much only move. And then, okay, whenever my opponents didn't play c4, looks like I pretty much a really good time, except for actually bishop g5. I would play g6. People would take. Generally, I was happy with these structures. I actually had a classical game not too long ago, like at the start of the year, where that kind of changed my mind on the positions, where it felt really uncomfortable. But that game went b3 instead, and the reason why I said it's kind of similar is because we got into a position like this where they ended up taking on f6. And I was happy to play that, but I really have to follow it up correctly here. I think I played bishop g7 in the game too, but I should really be very, very active with a move like d5. And this looks strange because, you know, allowing knight c3 and like d4 getting activity, but the point is with this the c pawn we can actually obstruct a lot of play, and this is a reasonable position. But okay, knight f6. I want to check the main lines most importantly, because I think that's gonna be the most fun thing to do. g6, knight c3. It doesn't matter if knight f3 or knight c3. e4, d6, and castles a little bit. I actually was not playing well against castles. I was playing okay against e5. e5 is not really the most amazing move. The reason why is it can be kind of illustrated by a Fischer game where you have moves like d6 and c5, and you really go after the center really fast and undermine it, and this can be a problem for white to maintain all of this, whereas black's already castled and well developed, even though it might not look like it with almost all the pieces on the back rank. But okay, d6, and let's see here. I would mainly see f4. Wow, that's actually surprising that I would mainly see f4, and that I have good results against it, because I always remembered struggling against f4, the 4 pawns attack. This was always something I was worried to see, but maybe it wasn't this year, maybe it was the next. That's fascinating. Knight f3, going into the main lines, I struggled against, of course. I knew that I was also pretty bad at the main lines, and as you can see here, I lost pretty much every single game going into it. e5, yeah, castles, knight c6, and yeah, like every move here, or every game. It was only 3 games though, but the games, whenever the main lines were reached, were lost as well, which is unfortunate. But that's kind of a good thing to know, that the main lines were the biggest issue for me. And I feel like that might be the case for some King's Indian players. I don't know if King's Indian players now would agree with that. I knew that at the time, I wasn't too invested in studying theory. So I just played King's Indian because it's like a natural setup, and it's like I know the ideas of like e5, knight c6, and then like knight e7, and then like f5, g5, g4. It's pretty similar each game. And if they deviate, then I'm happy kind of to see that, because generally like f4 or like knight f3, generally those positions are the most challenging, whereas if they play something like I don't know, just like anything else, well, obviously same-ish f3 as well. Trying to think of an example. But there's a lot of positions generally I feel like King's Indian players are happy to see. And one that might sound a little odd is I was very happy to see, always happy to see like an early d5, for example. Even though 2 wins and 1 loss, but that's okay. I was happy to see these because, well, the idea was like a5, knight a6, knight c5, all of these things. I just knew like very little theory, and for some reason it looks like it kind of held me off for the most part. But if people played main lines 91%, that's not good. That is not good at all, which makes it a little deceiving to see that when we go back all the way, I had a positive score against d4, and that's pretty much going to cover it for the year. I hope you guys found that interesting. Again, this was just a little random video covering all of my opening choices throughout 2020, what they looked like, how it kind of resulted and changed my thought process, I guess, as a player at the time. And we will be doing 2021 next in like a week or 2. And that one also, there will be no classical games in. But yeah, so if you want to skip that one as well, if you didn't feel like watching that, then that's okay. I know that there's a lot more deviations next year. to look at, and I think that'll be really interesting because I started exploring a lot more with openings, and I actually found a lot more joy in the game because of it. That's gonna be it. Thanks for watching, and see ya next time with a new video. Bye bye.